Okay. So Angie, you don't own a horse, correct?
I do not. I'm half leasing her right now.
Okay. And that is Starlight?
Starlight, correct.
Okay. Okay. And so where would you like to start today? Sorry, my cat's helping.
All good. It's beautiful.
She likes to be part of the Zoom
Um,
meetings.
oh yeah, yeah. Where would I like to start?
So
Well,
from the emails we did back and forth, which was a little while ago, it
yeah,
sounds like you want help working on your balance and your confidence as the primary focus.
correct, correct.
Okay.
So I'm having trouble with I feel like my natural alignment is more outward. So I'm having trouble keeping my legs on and keeping my legs forward
Okay.
instead of just, really riding like a cowboy. Everything is like out.
Okay.
Um, so it's all rotated to the outside, which then also I think I'm just very, very like my hamstrings are very, very stiff and very um tight.
Okay.
So which then brings me to the next point of my heels. I have trouble bringing my heels down to
Okay.
a point where, you wanna have a safe seat. So I'm
Okay.
not sure if you can see that in the video. Every time I try to get her forward, my heels come up just ever so slightly, and then I try to rotate my foot,
Okay.
but it's not staying down where I then can, get underneath her and push her up a little bit.
Okay.
So that's then it doesn't give clear cues to her sometimes. Um, yeah, it's all like a big.
And so what you're describing, it's sort of like the way we look at horses is the same way we look at riders. We tend to look at the head and neck and what the appendages are doing. So we look at
Mhm,
the rider's arms and legs, and we look at the horse's front legs and hind legs. And I come at it from a little bit of a different angle, that if we reverse that, if we look at the axial skeleton. So this our skeleton and the horse's skeleton is broken into two parts, and the axis is the skull, spine,
mhm,
rib cage, and pelvis. And so that axial part of the body is meant to be stable, and
mhm,
that's what frees the limbs. So we have a ball and socket joint in our shoulder, and we have a ball and socket hip joint.
mhm.
And so the use of the legs is really dependent on the stability of our midline.
Okay.
And so we'll have a look at that. And it's really the same for horses, but it's not where we look. So what I found is if I can help the rider understand how to stabilize the coordination of the axial skeleton, um, and figure out how to maintain that stability. So when the horse is moving, the horse pushes and pulls on that axial
Mhm,
stability, right? And so if we focus your riding from the seat bones and your midline balancing over the seat bones, what I find is every rider finds a naturally beautiful and effective rein contact and leg use as a result of that. Does
okay.
that make sense? So that's
It
kind
does
of
make
the
sense, yeah.
that's the approach I take, because I find sometimes like what you're describing, if your hamstrings are a little tight, if you tend to like rotate out, if you have trouble getting the heels down or your ankle or knee, because the heels down can trace right back up to the hip joint.
Yeah,
So if we're overextended through the hip joint, it's very hard to flex the ankle joint. And so all of those leg joints working in harmony has to do with the mobility of the hip joint.
yeah.
And that depends on the stability of the skull, spine, rib cage, and pelvis.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That
So
makes sense.
balance is always like whether we balance well or balance poorly, it's always a combination of mobility, and stability, right? And so what I looked at was what parts of the body in us and our horses are designed to be stable. So
Mm-hmm.
what functional anatomy and biomechanics shows us is, especially for the rider and for women, there's some particular challenges for the female body regarding the use of the lumbar, sacrum, and pelvis in particular. And that's what I consider our seat. So
Yeah.
I sort of start there because the shape of women's lumbar and pelvis is skeletally different than men,
Yeah.
but we're
Because we
given
have to bear kids.
exactly. And so when men put shoulders back, it actually stabilizes the lumbar and pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
When women put shoulders back, we get the same instruction. But if we do shoulders back and heels down,
Oh, no.
it tends to really arch our lumbar and destabilize our pelvic bones.
Mm-hmm.
And so the same instruction when it comes to the rider's seat has a very different effect. And so we'll
Okay.
kind of look at just maybe changing the language a little bit or look at where you're starting and where we could shore up. I kind of focus on the seat and the midline of the rider and
Mm-hmm.
then let the arms and legs find more adaptability, because if we're balancing through our legs and arms, trying to stabilize through the stirrups and the reins, it's often we don't notice that we're becoming unstable through the midline.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's just what the body does. If the horse bounces us around in our seat, we instantly tighten our arms and legs. Can't help it. That's what we do. So we have to learn how to go, oh, I need to bring the tightness to my low back, my core, my center is where you want to feel tight, but not in the arms and legs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes
Okay.
sense.
So it's just kind of a different way of looking at writing. So I just wanted to get on the same page. So now I'm going to pull up the video. Can you see the screen okay?
I can, yeah. All good.
Okay. So this was the first, you sent me three videos
Yeah.
titled, two of them are least day and one is Western dressage. Is there any particular video you want to start with?
Nope. All good. We can start with whatever
Okay.
you want to.
Okay. Let me make this larger. And is this Starlight?
This is Starlight.
Okay. And it's a little choppy when we share, even though I optimized it.
That's okay.
Yeah, so coming down the center line, it looks like she puts you a little off to the right. Like you actually have pretty good balance.
Yeah, but I feel like if I would frame her better, I could hold her better in those situations.
Oops. There we go.
Yeah, Joanne has to work on her videographing skills.
Yeah, she's probably talking and videotaping
She
at the
is.
same time.
She is.
So I'm just going to pause. Let me back it up just a little. That's kind of a good view. So from this angle, do you see how you're a bit tipped over to the right?
I see that, and I saw that the whole video, and I don't know, maybe it was I have no idea why.
Okay. So the main reason why is when we're given instruction, have you been told to keep your feet equal in the stirrups and keep your seat bones equal?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that's good advice on a horse that's in good balance. You're trying to do that on a crooked horse, and the horse is shifting you over to the right. So this side of
You
your
think she's
body,
crooked a little?
yeah. And
Okay.
most horses are crooked. I go, the riding instruction we get is for a theoretical, perfectly balanced horse. None of us have ridden that horse.
Okay.
I go, so we have to find different riding instruction because every horse I've ever sat on is crooked or not lifting the back or falling on the
Mm-hmm.
forehand. And
Mm-hmm.
so the skill of the rider is to think about not the saddle or the horse, but where you are over the ground, where you
Mm-hmm.
are over gravity. And so what you're feeling is that you're straight because your weight is equal between your seat bones and your legs. Your weight feels equal left to right. But you can see your skeleton is actually off.
I'm
The,
tipping, yeah.
yeah, the reason you feel equal is because this horse's back is lower on the right than the left. So you are equal, but if we like look at her back as doing this, you're equal
Mm-hmm.
like this.
Yeah, okay.
And where you should be is not feeling equal. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah.
And so one aspect of balance in the horse is called rotation, which is different than lateral bending.
Mm-hmm.
And rotation is a spinal function. If you think of the dorsal tips of the horse's spine, when they're balanced, they remain upright. When the horse loses their balance, they sort of tilt left and right. It's a twisting motion in us. It's this movement in us,
Okay.
right? But on the horse, if we think of the horse being horizontal, it feels like a rolling motion. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? And that's why the
Okay.
saddle goes off to one side, the rider goes off to one side, why we think we need a tighter girth or a sticky pad is because the horse's barrel is doing that, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what's moving the saddle. And so it's a little disorienting. You'll have to play with some video of yourself because when you adjust your body weight to actually get a straight vertical line through your head, spine, seat bones, all the way to the ground. Actually, where's my little tools? I'm not very good at drawing, but
Oh, good.
I'm gonna try to just draw kind of a straight line from the ceiling to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I ran out of, anyways.
All good.
So now you see you've got more skeleton over to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that is the horse is tilting, and for you to feel straight on a crooked horse and keep your weight equal, you have to go with that.
Mm-hmm.
What we're meant to do as riders, and this takes you from beginner level to elite level, but it also balances because it also balances the horse. What you would feel in this moment is that greater than 50% of your body weight would need to be on your left seat bone and
Mm-hmm.
down your left leg. You,
Okay.
or you could also think of, if you think of the saddle has a middle channel called a gullet,
Mm-hmm.
and then it has a right bar and a left bar as the tree of the saddle, right? I think sometimes when I feel that tilt, I just move my seat bones and I straddle the left bar or the right bar of the tree. So I'm
Okay.
no longer in the center of the saddle on a crooked horse. So the two ways to do it, like if it's a lot of force, if it's only a little bit of force, you could invisibly shift your body weight to where this horse is lifting your left side.
Okay.
So you would just keep more weight on that seat bone, kind of like your body weight is like sand. You can just pour it where you want,
Okay.
right? So you would have, and that's what makes initially when I work with riders on this, it hurts the brain because you feel really crooked.
Okay.
So you need to get some video and pictures of yourself as you go. I would recommend go back and forth, go to where you feel straight, but then you see on the video I'm crooked.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to play with, I'm going to just put more weight over on my left side and and see if I don't go down with the horse's barrel, if I sit on the high side and I find a sense of standing over the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can use the arena ground as your point of reference, it's a little easier to find than trying to be in the middle of the horse or
Gotcha.
even the
Okay.
middle of the saddle. And what we're looking for is a standing sensation over the horse. So if the horse disappeared in a second, we would sort of land on both feet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, have you ever been on a boat getting your sea legs?
No,
Okay.
never.
Uh, maybe a bicycle. Okay. So like on a bicycle, as the terrain changes, we have to recalibrate our balance a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then if we had a bicycle that sort of pulled right or pulled left, we have to really put some weight against that force of pulling.
Yeah.
It, that's basically what the rider has to do all the time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
Okay. And when the horse comes into balance, it feels like a smooth ride on the bicycle, right? But when the horse is a little out of balance, it's like we're having to counteract that
Mm-hmm.
force of the imbalance in order to get ourselves vertical and level side to side. So you can kind of see with this line, I would say if that were my body, I would probably feel like I had anywhere between 60 or 70% of my body weight over on that left side.
Okay.
And it's going to make you feel crooked.
Okay.
Yeah. So just you have to kind of go back and forth. One of the things you can check, especially left to right, is if in this same moment, if you looked down at your own thigh bones,
Mm-hmm.
your right thigh bone would appear longer and lower, and
Okay.
your left thigh bone would appear higher and look shorter.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
see that? And
Yeah.
even though what you're doing a really good job of is if I go down to the feet, your feet are kind of level to each other. And that might be where you feel the stress. You can't put your heels down because you've managed to get your feet level. But then if we go up to the knees, that's where we see the left knee higher, right knee lower, and then we see it across the hip joint and the pelvis.
Okay.
You see that? And you're
Yeah.
doing a very good job counteracting that a little bit with your shoulders. So you're certainly not the most crooked rider I've ever seen, but what you're doing is succumbing to the imbalance of the horse.
Okay.
Okay. So then let me just see if I can get a little bit of a different angle. Let me see if I can move that line. Yeah. And so you see as you go, oh, whoops, my line doesn't want to move as a line. I'm not great with these annotation tools. Let me just get rid of that one.
Yeah.
Um, here's a straight line. Let's try that. But do you see now that, well, I might not even need to redraw the line. Can you see it now?
I can see it now. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let me just play it through. And if you watch you can put it between the ceiling and the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're balanced, whether the horse is balanced or not, we have a line of force, an invisible line of force that isn't stiff. It just feels as straight as a carousel pole in the middle of the
Mm-hmm.
horse. And what we have to do is the horse's movement keeps throwing our center line left, right, forward, and back. And so invisibly, we're having to shift weight purposely, in this case, to the left to get that center line vertical again over the ground.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
What it feels like is I had one client tell me I'm having a helmet fire. Like it just hurts the brain because you're used to navigating your balance according to the saddle and the horse,
Mm-hmm.
not according to gravity. But
Yeah.
gravity is the one constant we have. So the horse's movement is like a river or an ocean, and we're trying to get
Mm.
upright in the middle of that force of motion. So then I'm going to look for a place where you're a little closer to have a side view, because you tend to keep your body a little bit behind the vertical when we look at it front to back. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait till you come a little closer to the camera. But if you look at your torso even far away, do you see how your legs are in front of you that looks more
Yeah,
like you're sitting rather than
like a chair seat.
standing? Hmm. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, especially I rode Western many years, and we're kind of encouraged to sit on your pockets. There we go. So as hopefully we get a nice close side view shot. That's a little too close.
It is. It's yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, that's pretty good. So the reason you think you rotate out has to do with, again, if we drew that same line from this angle, right? Do you see how your torso is kind of back here and your legs are in front of you
Yeah,
rather than underneath your
underneath.
torso? And so we're
Like you
told,
said, if you would take the horse away, I would not, like my center of gravity, I would fall because
you,
my legs are up here and the center of gravity is back here. So I would not
yes,
even squat. I would just fall on my bottom.
yes, exactly. Yeah, you see that.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at a good rider, or when we're feeling it, I'm always looking for that feeling of standing, not sitting,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if that puts you a little too far forward, in a Western saddle, you're going to land on your crotch before you get too far forward, right?
Yes.
So the Western saddles invite us onto our pockets, and they invite the rider into this posture that you're using. And so a couple of things happen. Every single rider will rotate out in this position. It
Okay.
happens. You can't
Interesting.
control it. And so when you drop your stirrups, what I would do to find this is drop your stirrups completely and find the standing feeling over your seat bones through
Mm-hmm.
your torso to seat bones. And what we're really balancing on in the saddle are two little knobby points that the bottom of our pelvis is like a little rocker,
Mm-hmm.
and we're trying to get on the point of the rocker.
Mm-hmm.
That's what frees the legs. But
Okay.
it's a precarious point, because once we're balancing our whole torso on these little points, we have to make minute adjustments forward, back, left, right all the time just to keep finding vertical,
Okay.
right? And we can feel gravity, even though it's an invisible force. I sort of imagine gravity like a dry piece of spaghetti noodle everywhere I go. And as the horse is pushing me around, I'm trying to get my center back in line with that vertical force. And it might help you find that through your torso faster, if even if you have to have someone lead you around on the horse so you can focus on it. That's one way to
Mm-hmm.
do it. And definitely drop your stirrups.
Mm-hmm.
And what will happen is if you rock back without your stirrups, every single human being feels an outward rotation of the leg, and the quadriceps and the hamstrings pull the thigh bone up.
Mm-hmm.
So the leg gets pulled up and opens out. And that's
Okay.
only because you have your weight concentrated in your seat and you have almost very little weight in your legs.
Okay.
So when you rock the torso forward, right, and you have a little bit of that female curvature through the lumbar. It's a little hard to see with the dark jacket, but you can kind of see your low back arches forward just a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you a sequence of events that I give all women, and it's also going to hurt the brain. So have someone with a phone on standby so you can instantly look at pictures of yourself.
Okay.
Even if it's just a friend, from a side view directly sideways at you. I think the left to right, that you want to get a view from the tail, a backwards
Mm-hmm.
view. But for the front to back balance, which is related to the up to down balance, you want to get a straight side view.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm almost afraid to monkey with your low back in this lesson because I'm giving you a lot. But I'm going to give you a sequence of events.
Okay.
At the halt, you're going to drop your stirrups.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before you drop your stirrups, get a starting point photograph,
Okay.
okay, of what feels normal to you because your brain has already normalized. And
Yeah.
that's what, when we change coordination, the brain screams, hates it. We don't, brains hate changing coordination. So you need the
Mm-hmm.
photographs to override that feeling of it being weird and wrong.
Okay.
Okay. So start with a picture of what you look like from a side view. Then drop your stirrups, get another picture. But once you drop your stirrups, you're going to notice how heavy your seat is compared to the body weight that you have in your legs.
Mm-hmm.
Your legs are going to feel lighter than your seat by comparison. Okay. So with your legs dangling, as you rock the shoulders forward and you come forward over the seat bones,
Yeah.
the more forward you go, the more the seat lightens and the more weight automatically falls into the legs.
Mm-hmm.
It also rotates the legs inward, so
Yeah.
you find the inner thigh muscle, the adductor, which is what you should be balancing on, and your quads and hamstrings let go. That's
Okay.
how, that's kind of how you know that your legs are underneath you.
Okay.
And what you're used to back here, you're going to feel like a jockey. You're going to feel like you're leaning so far forward, it's ridiculous. And that's why you need a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But the activation of the inner thigh muscle is how I find my vertical alignment on a lot of different horses and a lot of different saddles.
Okay.
So if you just drop your stirrups and you try to keep your lumbar straight, don't worry about your shoulders, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But you're going to try to just keep your low back straight, and you're going to try to keep your pelvis level, and you're just going to rock that level pelvis and straight lumbar, just like I'm doing now. You're just going to kind
Mm-hmm.
of rock forward and back. And actually, while you're sitting in your chair, you can feel it. So if you sit on your butt in your chair, right, you
Yeah.
feel it engages the hamstrings.
Yeah.
It engages the quads,
Mm-hmm.
and the seat has more weight compared to the legs.
That's true. Yeah.
So now, if you can, sort of straddle the side of the chair as much as you can to
Yeah.
simulate riding. And then you're going to straighten the lumbar and just tilt forward. And you feel the weight comes out of the seat, goes into the legs.
Yeah.
So when we're on the barrel of the horse, you can't feel this part in a chair, but when you're on the barrel of the horse, the deepest inner thigh muscle that we almost call a groin muscle,
Mm-hmm.
it just gently activates. We don't really
Okay.
squeeze, we don't really use it. It just sort of automatically activates when our thigh bones are actually under our axial skeleton. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
And if I were working with you in person, I would not be surprised if you're going to want to take your stirrup length down about 3 holes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When you get your torso vertical, you're going to feel like the short leg that you have is part of what keeps pushing you back into your seat. And in order to have a
Okay.
standing alignment, you have beautiful long legs. And If you were standing, your foot would come under that horse's belly.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, you don't have to start 3 holes down, but you could start one at a time to get used to it. But the shortness of your stirrup, when you do push your heels down, and because you're in your seat, your legs rotated out, not only is it difficult, like when you try to push your heels down, your lower leg is going to pop off the horse. You have no lower leg from
Right.
there, right? When you find the inner thigh by being more vertical, your inner thigh is the steering from the saddle,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's how you're going to turn the horse's barrel for straight lines, left turns, right turns. Your lower leg, that's another way that I know my torso is vertical because I not only feel the inner thigh muscle activate, my leg contact, like when you're back in your seat, your leg contact is maybe just this much of the upper calf. There's not
Mm-hmm.
much touching the horse.
Yeah.
And when you're vertical, that calf contact goes almost all the way down to the ankle. Your calves are on the horse for
Wrapped
your,
around it.
Mhm. And you're not trying to jam joints around. They're just there,
Okay. Okay.
right? And so that increase of contact of my calf against the horse and that activation of the inner thigh, I don't do anything to my legs to get either one of those. I play with the position of my seat bones to skull,
Okay.
forward and back, as well as a little bit left to right. But that's the symmetry of your thigh bones. If you look down from the saddle and your thigh bones are not equal to each other,
Mm-hmm.
then you're crooked left to right. Right. And I used to train myself. I go around, look at my own thigh bones all the time and go, oops, I'm crooked again. Right. And so, like, if you look at your thigh bones when the right one is lower, you need to get weight and maybe even your skeleton a little over to the left until your thigh bones look equal to each other. That's how you know
Mm-hmm.
you're straight left to right. The way you know you're straight front to back is when my torso is actually vertical. My legs automatically do everything I'm describing. So I don't need to pull my legs inward. I don't need to try to put my heels down. I don't need to try to get my knees in or my thighs in on the horse. It's just there,
It just falls into place.
falls
Okay.
into place. And the
Okay.
leg falling into place is that's the result of the torso balance. And so I use it as a feedback mechanism because every horse I get on where vertical actually is never quite feels exactly the same on any two
Mm-hmm.
horses. So
Right.
I use the feeling of my legs falling into that place to tell me, okay, I'm vertical. And on some horses, even now, my brain says, you're too far forward, you're too far back, you're too far left or right. But that, symmetry of your thigh bones and result of contact on the inside of your legs,
Mm-hmm.
that tells you, okay, I'm balanced left to right and front to back. I'm now vertical.
Mm-hmm.
Does that
Okay,
make
that makes
sense?
sense. It makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just want to give you one last piece that if you have trouble when you're tilting the pelvis or rocking on the seat bones forward and back, the lumbar is particularly tricky for women to actually really straighten.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I help women find the right muscles is we start with a slouch.
Okay.
It sounds terrible, but I'll actually have you do this in the chair so you feel it. So when we do shoulders back for women, if you lift through the sternum and you thrust the
Mm-hmm.
shoulders back, you feel automatically your back arches forward.
Mm-hmm.
You feel that? And
Yeah.
and so for women, we have to start by sort of dropping the sternum in and down.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have a gentle slump through the
Yeah.
chest, all of a sudden you can straighten that curve in your lumbar very easily. with your
Yeah.
belly muscles. You feel that?
Yeah.
Okay. So give yourself permission as you're exploring your seat. And your seat is a very straight lumbar, sacrum, and pelvis. That's the
Okay.
seat of the rider. So for women to develop, because for men, shoulders back puts them in the exact right bony alignment. But for women, not only
Okay.
do we have different shaped lumbar and pelvis, oh yeah, we also have 20% more connective tissue. Thank you very much. So for us, we have to find what feels like a coordination rather than a gesture.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever you slouch in the saddle, it helps you find all of the deeper core muscles that
Mm-hmm.
stabilize the lumbar, sacrum, and pelvis. And
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
play with the slouch, play with the straight lumbar, and the rocking. And if you can put those three torso things together, you'll find more and more your legs fall in the right place.
Okay.
Because if you don't get that leg contact, it could be an arch through the lumbar. Because we're
Okay.
so hammered shoulders back, like from the first ride we ever get on, shoulders back, heels down. And that for women is the most debilitating riding instruction on the planet. It does not serve our seat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for women, shoulders back is easy. We have no upper body muscle, so getting the shoulders back is a piece of cake. You don't have to try. And when we try to do it, we screw up our seat because we arch the
Mm-hmm.
lumbar. So those are the things I would have you play with.
Okay.
And then let
Okay.
me kind of keep going on the video. And as you're going now, whether it's walk or trot, the struggle you're having guiding the horse is because you're having to work very hard just to maintain your stability because your axis is not vertical and your legs are
Mm-hmm.
not underneath you.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Right.
means you have to work pretty hard. And on the horse's side, the horse is coping with your imbalance. So the horse works harder too. And
Right.
that's why
Right.
some people get on a horse and the horse goes fine, and another rider gets on the horse and the horse is like, yeah, I can't do that. And it has a lot to do because I look at it that balance is dynamic. It's not a trained thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
we are mass with weight. So
Right.
it's if we look at it through the lens of physics, I go, you can't be with all your weight in your seat and not impact the horse's movement, make it harder. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how you balance makes it easier or harder for the horse to balance and perform. And it really, I
Okay.
go, that to me, the rider balance is what I call the primary aid because it
Mm-hmm.
overrides any leg aid, any rein aid you could possibly give. When you're crooked and she's having, I guess she would have kind of a little challenge turning left if both of you are tipped over to the right. Or so going left, she might feel stiff, and going right, she might fall in or drop the shoulder. If this is a habitual pattern.
I know that I'm having a hard time on my left
Hmm.
since my son was born. Like I am very stiff on my left side. I'm having a harder time going to the left than going to the right.
Yeah.
That's why I might also be crooked to the right a little bit more, or
Yeah. And
fall onto the right a little bit better.
no, because you kind of fall. Hang on. Let me get the next video. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to do that. Too many buttons. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, let me go to the next video. Oh, that's the last one. Hang on. Oh, these look like they're on the same day.
They were, yeah. We
Okay.
just had to break them up a little. My son was actually, I had to bring my son to videotape me
Mm-hmm.
because usually there's nobody around that I could ask.
I know. I know the feeling.
That's why it took me so long.
Yeah. So we're just
And then
gonna
I
look.
also feel like the set, like, yeah,
I was just gonna say, we'll just look and see if there's the same patterns. Like for what we're talking about and what you're coping with, you're doing a really good job staying stable and quiet. And I just think you must be working pretty hard. And that's maybe why you feel a little bit stuck or like you're missing something, is because
okay,
the way your skeleton is makes your legs work harder, puts some stress on your hip joint, and it's restricting the ankle joint. And you don't look as obviously crooked in this video left to right. You look more level,
yeah.
but more, again, heavy in the seat with your legs in front of you.
I also think the saddle is putting me into that position.
With Western saddles, that's one of the design features that you have to kind of shop around,
Yeah,
because some Western saddles are so sloped through the rise of the seat that it's meant to put you in the back of the saddle. But not all
yeah.
Western saddles do that. And you might feel
Even
like
how
you're,
the fenders are aligned. The fenders are usually, so when your pocket is back here, your
yeah,
fenders are usually aligned right a little bit more to the front, which makes it really hard not to be in a chair seat.
yes,
And I was like, my previous barn, I tried to get rid, it was English though. My previous barn, I tried to really hard to get rid of that chair seat. You know, I learned like you have to stand up, just rotate your thigh, like literally pull your thigh back and then
yes.
sit back down.
So
Things like this. And I
I
still do
was,
that.
well, and I was taught that same move, but as long as you are behind vertical and as long as your weight is in your seat, you can't control that.
Okay,
And
yeah.
so what I'm saying is that same feeling of pulling your muscle out and finding the inner thigh, that's the result of getting yourself vertical.
Hmm.
So in your particular saddle, if that makes it irritating to your crotch, then you're fighting the saddle to get your balance. I would say it would be worth switching saddles.
I'm
Not
looking
all,
around. Yeah, it's not that easy.
but not all Western saddles will do that. I can get in most Western saddles and find my balance without killing my crotch. But
Okay.
but I feel like I have to work a little bit against the saddle to stay there.
Yeah.
And so you just have to be mindful if like a horse with a dropped back does the same thing. If their back is really hollow, it sort of pulls the rider into their seat.
Yeah.
And then the design of the saddle can also pull the rider into the seat. And you're exactly right. Like my Western saddle, I had to look for one that had a greater, flatter surface area and where the fenders were hanging closer to the seat bones,
Yeah.
where the seat bones didn't go back here and the stirrups were up here.
And
And a
that's
lot,
what this one does.
yeah, a lot of Western saddles are designed that way because, and actually, even dressage saddles can be designed that way because the fashion in dressage and Western is to be behind the vertical.
Mm,
I go, it's a fashion, it's not balance, but
yeah.
that's why in dressage they make bigger and bigger and bigger thigh blocks because the riders are sitting on their butt too much, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think you do a fantastic job
Thank
with
you.
how you are currently organized. I can see where you're frustrated because it's quite hard work the way you're doing it. And you're not really effective. You can't be effective with your aids
Right.
from this place. And that's sort of why you're noticing I can't get my heels down, my hamstrings are super tight, I'm rotated out. All of those things have to do with where your torso is left to right and front to back.
Okay.
So let me stop this one here before I lose my bearings again, because sometimes YouTube just moves on to some random next video. And so this is the last video.
Hmm.
And so while we're sort of looking at this, and this looks like it's the other direction, which is good. I just
Yeah.
want to sort of see what goes on to the left, because you said that was a little bit your harder direction, and it could be just the horse's harder direction, or a little bit of
So
both.
no, this is actually to the right.
Oh, yep, you're right.
So this is to the right. Yeah.
So the
This
last
is
one
where
was to the
she actually
left.
has, yeah, she actually has trouble to the right a little bit more. She's hollow on the right, and she has trouble picking up the right lead, especially when we try to lope. So I
Yes.
have to really, you can see that in a little bit. She's picking the wrong lead, and I have to correct her like two times until she finally, I set her up right, and she finally picks up the right lead.
So that goes back to the first place where I paused the video on the first video and I drew the red line,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see your body over to the right. That is what we call in horses a right-handed horse. It is actually, she's crooked. She has her,
Okay.
and that's why she can't, she, with, like, she's constantly with the dorsal tips of the spine slightly right. It rolls the barrel slightly right,
Mm-hmm.
which means the left hind leg gets underused and the right front leg gets overused. And so she can push off into a right lead canter probably easily, but she can't lift the left leg as a leading leg.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right.
So to
Front.
get a right lead, you might need a bit of outside bend and you might need to be sitting out on the left side
Okay.
because she's already pulling your body weight down to where her body weight's going. So what happens when we're out of balance, like that first line I drew through your body,
Mm-hmm.
your skeleton was off to the right, which means your body weight is heavier on the right. So you and
Mm-hmm.
her, skeleton and body weight move together. What
Okay.
happens so that we don't fall over is the opposite side kicks into tight muscles.
Mm-hmm.
So the opposite side tightens up, saying, hey, if I don't tighten, we're going to fall over,
Oh, yeah.
right? And we can go like that for years. It's very common. It's every horse I ride. I'm correcting that issue with the horse for the horse's balance. But for you as a rider, 90% of how I correct that problem is I don't go with the horse. I use my body weight and my skeleton on the tight side of the horse, which is where we feel the upward force pitching us
Okay.
is that's the muscle tightness. Gravity and the horse's body is pulling us to the low side. So we have to actively get our body weight and our skeleton to the high side and act as almost a ballast until the horse can figure out, oh, I don't need to fall forward over here. So you're sort of spotting the horse in a way until they figure it out.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, you can see it on the right lead canter that she goes quite downhill and she has trouble really lifting the
Yeah.
front legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they can have trouble on a canter lead either because the inside hind on the big swing is restricted, or the inside front is overloaded.
I think, yeah, okay. I think the inside front is overloaded because that would
Mm-hmm.
also make sense because she was a little off, which felt like it was the right front.
Yeah.
But she was trying to, she, after a lesson, she just felt off and it was like sort of, trying to keep your weight off. So she was really fast on the right front.
Yes.
And now that would make sense now, totally. And
Yes.
also when I have her on the right side lead, when I try to, she has the tendency to, even on the right side lead, to tilt her head just ever so slightly to the left.
Yes. That's
And
what
if I pick her up,
she's doing that to
she's
not fall over.
counterbalancing. She's
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
right, right. So when I ever so slightly try to make her look to the inside a little bit, she usually switches leads.
Yes, because
So she usually switches then. It's kind of like a flying lead change. It's like, okay, I didn't ask you, but
yes. And
and I
all of
thought it was me doing something wrong.
it's her managing as best she can to not fall over. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Okay.
And so
It
what I
does.
look
Yeah.
at is I wanted to come back to this first video. Here we go. Why isn't it getting bigger? Why isn't it getting bigger? So what we looked at when I drew that first red line,
Mhm.
and can you see it or am I in the wrong screen?
I can see it.
Okay, so it's not opening to full screen. I don't
It's
know
okay.
why. Okay, I'm just going to play it because it was just to go back all the way back to where I first drew that red line and you saw your body was crooked.
Mhm.
That's what I call a dysfunctional habit of coordination,
Okay.
right? So you don't notice it's a problem until you get to canter, but it's
Okay.
already there in the walk. I guarantee it's there in the trot. And then it really shows up with struggle to get the leads,
Mhm.
right? But that pattern of how she's coordinating herself between the left and right balance is always there.
Okay.
So the good news is you don't have to canter to fix it. If you fix it at the walk and you fix it at the trot, that's how I address the lead issue.
Okay.
So I don't have to have all these gadgets and tricks to pick up the right lead. I have to rebalance her, and then it's easy for her to pick up the right lead. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah.
And so when you work on your own balance, you are dynamically going to have a positive effect. You're going to make her poor coordination harder for her to maintain because your body is getting in the way,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
So she might not behave as perfectly as you both go through this adjustment. Be a little bit patient with her if she loses forward, if she goes a little fast, if she goes a little slow, if
She
this
doesn't have forward.
okay. Well, she may stop even more often at first while she's recalibrating. And so what I would do to let her recalibrate is if she halts, then give her leg and ask for forward. But while she's moving, even if it's in a cloud of turtle dust, as I like to say,
Mhm.
you're going to work on your vertical alignment and
Okay.
let her figure out how to adjust underneath you because the horses always do it better than we can do it.
Mhm.
So if you just really focus on your balance especially without your stirrups, she's going to feel that and she's
Okay.
going to respond, not always positively at first. Sometimes
Okay.
they're like, I can't move like that. What are you doing? And so, just like us, it feels weird. It doesn't feel easy or good at first. It feels challenging at first.
Mm-hmm.
But as they start to change, it always feels good to have better mechanics and better balance. It's
Okay.
just that window of going from the habit to correct, that window can be a little bit of a wild card. You don't know what's going to happen in that window.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Okay.
it doesn't always, it isn't like I think people expect, oh, you balance them and it's smooth and beautiful. I go, no, everybody kind of goes, wait a minute. No, no, that's not right. Before they get it right, they kind of resist the change a little bit.
Okay. Which is okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Fine with that.
And you have a great relationship. This is a great little horse, and you guys work well together. She's very tuned into you. You're very tuned into her. You have, I would say, 80% of the skills you already need to be a great rider. I just think tweaking your balance is hang on, let me just stop this share. It's getting confusing. Okay. I can see all the training you've put into yourself. And the reason I teach what I teach is because I find it's what's missing. I
Okay.
just find that traditional riding instruction is missing very key elements that bring every rider up to an elite level of skill. Because really, that's
Okay.
how we should all be riding our horses. It's not any harder to be a great rider than it is to be a good rider. But it's more precision.
Mm-hmm.
It's less work physically, which I'm always grateful for as I age every year. But it is a coordination like learning to ride a bike,
Mm-hmm.
right? So to be able to ride that bike, you fall over a lot, you get it wrong a lot, and then when you figure it out, you don't forget because the body wants to be in balance,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once you start to find it and you get through the weird sensation of it, you find a lot less work than what you're doing right now as a rider.
Okay, that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because you're working pretty hard and so is the horse. And then her lack of desire to go forward tells you she's not comfortable in forward motion. That's the only reason horses lose forward is because it's energy inefficient if they're crooked
Okay.
and they're on the forehand. So they go, why bother? Like,
Okay.
and
Is there
then
something else I can help her with?
your balance, because she's not drastically out of balance. I look at your balance issues and your horse's balance issues are both kind of minimal. I think a little bit of tweaking will go a long way.
Okay.
And as she gets that right-handedness sorted out, I always find horses like her begin to offer more forward little by little. It doesn't come
Okay.
all at once. It just starts to be at first less stopping. And then gradually they start to get that energy flow and they want to go forward the more comfortable they get.
Okay. Funny, it's just like little pieces fall into place right now while we have that conversation. It all makes sense now
Yeah.
because I always felt like she was very heavy on the forehand. But
Yeah.
then I also like questioning myself, like, you don't know that. Like, it's maybe it's you know, maybe I make her do things because I always feel like I'm not that good of a writer because like several instructors didn't like with Joanne, I really had so much luck to get her because all the other instructors, they never taught me the right way, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's and
Yes.
they never had the right horses. They were very high strung, they were very hot. You know, you
Yes.
didn't have time to check in with yourself because you had to be there 150% all the time with the horses. Like it, most of the hour of my lesson was, half of it was like, okay, this is this button, this is this button, now I have to do this. Oh, this is how I get her back. Half hold here, make her do, like I didn't have the chance to tune in with myself to see, okay, where am I here? I
Yes.
always had to make sure the horses was okay and I was safe on the horse.
And one of the best things, I do this sometimes, well, I do it with every rider at some point, even very upper level riders, is if you give yourself the luxury of just focusing on what you feel, you can become a better rider faster by having somebody lead the horse around,
Mhm.
right? While you just drop your stirrups, rest your hands, and explore the use of your lumbar, sort of that slouchy feeling. Where do I belong on the seat bones?
Mhm.
Letting the toes dangle, and just get used to how do I, as the horse moves, the movement of the horse is like being in a river. So the movement starts behind us, it flows underneath us and out the front. And depending on the horse's balance, we're going to feel the current, we're going to feel waves, we're going to feel kind of a pull left and
Mhm.
right. And in the middle of that river of invisible force, we're trying to stand up in our canoe. We're
Mhm.
trying to, or what are those standing boards, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to just get ourselves right as these forces of motion keep flowing.
Pulling. Mhm.
And so when somebody leads the horse for you, the forces of motion are going to be challenging because you're not actively helping the horse. But if you can find your stability and your vertical alignment with the ground in the middle of those forces, you learn how to ride very quickly.
Okay.
You start to own it very quickly.
Okay.
And I think two things happen in traditional training. One is people don't give adults that kind of time of self-exploration. And I think
Mhm.
it's critical, especially for adults. We do it with kids, but we never do it with adults. And the other thing is the focus on get the horse to do this. You can't learn your balance while you're focused on the horse.
Right.
And so we sort of get these, turn your head, shoulders back, heels down, sit back, sit forward, bring your legs in. And it's kind of random without actually teaching us how do I just find stability no matter what the horse throws at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it'll make you a good rider on any horse, any saddle you get in.
Sounds
So,
great.
and then if like play with it, and I also did write, I have a workbook that it's only on my website as a download. I don't have it printed, but it's called Rider Balance Workbook.
Mhm.
And in that workbook, I spend half of the workbook going through exercises of kind of self-exploration, self-awareness off the horse.
Okay.
And then also everything we sort of talked about on the horse, whether you're being led around or whether you're actively directing the horse. So that might be, it's not a light read. Nothing I do is light,
It's okay.
but you can walk yourself through each exercise. It's meant to sort of help guide you in through the process of really improving your riding through
Okay.
self-awareness and self-control.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll
So I
check that
might,
out.
yeah, I'll recommend that to you for as a follow-up to just everything we talked about today. And then
Okay.
let me stop the recording.